the incident involving Anton, the coerced CEO in the Balkans, and the terrifying efficiency of Compliance Option 7 had definitively sealed Augustus Darren Finch's place within Victor Sterling's impenetrable inner sanctum. His display of ruthless, surgical logic was not a matter of petty malice or volatile temperament, but of cold, operational strategy, and that calculated detachment made him uniquely invaluable to the chairman. His reward for this successful deployment of strategic cruelty was not merely a larger bonus or more capital, though those came as well, but the ultimate trust Victor Sterling could bestow upon an employee. He was summarily removed from the complex, strategic planning desks and abruptly elevated to the intensely intimate, high-stakes role of personal bodyguard and chauffeur for Sterling's beautiful but profoundly estranged and emotionally distant wife, Eleanor Sterling. This swift shift in assignment was a critical, strategic move by Sterling. It placed Darren at the very nucleus of Sterling's private, vulnerable domestic life, demanding absolute, unquestioning loyalty and total discretion, while simultaneously offering Darren an unparalleled, fly-on-the-wall vantage point into the personal weaknesses, habits, and secrets of the man he served. Sterling, a man who possessed the kind of wealth that breeds paranoia and who trusted virtually no one on earth, trusted Darren only because the young man had proven his complete, cynical detachment from all human emotion and his unwavering, almost terrifying commitment to the purely transactional contract they shared. Darren was now plunged headfirst into a world of extreme opulence that made the most lavish, unfulfilled dreams of his previous life in the Rust Belt seem like pale, childish drawings. Eleanor Sterling inhabited a vast, impossibly luxurious penthouse occupying the highest floors atop one of Chicago's most exclusive, secure towers, a residence that functioned less as a warm, inviting home and more as an exquisite, but utterly sterile, museum of wealth and cold perfection. The air was perpetually hushed. The surfaces gleamed with marble imported at astronomical cost from Carrara. The walls were adorned with original canvases by Renaissance and contemporary masters, and the numerous rooms were designed with the precise, cold elegance of a maximum security vault. This environment was built to impress and intimidate, not to nurture. Darren's day-to-day life transformed completely, shifting from the quiet, intellectual analysis of global supply chain logistics to the meticulous physical management of Eleanor Sterling's safety, convenience, and complicated daily schedule, a bizarre, jarring transition that required him to completely rewire his daily priorities. He now drove a succession of armored, custom-made vehicles, each worth substantially more than his entire childhood home and its surrounding neighborhood combined. He sat for hours in exclusive, hushed waiting rooms while Eleanor consulted with world-renowned specialists for trivial ailments, or was fitted for custom couture that cost more than a year of his former university tuition. He moved constantly through elite social circles where fortunes were discussed, gained, and lost as casually as one might discuss the prevailing weather forecast. He was close enough to touch the cold gold, to smell the complex, expensive perfumes, and to feel the plush velvet and silk of this utterly inaccessible world, yet he remained utterly outside it, encased in his professional shell of dark, bespoke suits and unwavering composure. His role was defined by two simple, absolute mandates: absolute, silent protection, and complete logistical invisibility. Eleanor Sterling was a beautiful, ethereal woman in her late 40s, whose entire presence was defined by a profound, pervasive emotional detachment, a coldness born of years spent married to an all-consuming, terrifying man who saw her as a possession, a glittering trophy meant to signify his success rather than a partner or a companion. Her face, impeccably maintained through the finest means money could buy, often bore a look of deep, ineffable sadness, a silent internal protest against the gilded cage Victor Sterling had constructed around her life. She initially treated Darren with the casual, unconscious indifference of the extremely privileged, seeing him as merely another sophisticated piece of household machinery, a highly efficient, silent fixture whose sole purpose was her security and convenience. Darren, however, was far from silent in his observation. He possessed the poet's acute eye for minute detail, the relentless analyst's ability to categorize human behavior, and the intellectual's complete detachment from subjective, emotional judgment. He silently observed Eleanor Sterling's entire emotional life, noting the micro-expressions that betrayed her exhaustion. The barely perceptible tremor in her hand when she was forced to speak to her husband on the phone, and the profound, isolating loneliness that seemed to follow her like a physical shadow through the vast, echoing hallways of her penthouse. He catalogued her habits, her fears, and her evasions, purely for the purposes of threat assessment and operational awareness. The complexity of his position deepened dramatically as he realized the full, extensive extent of the emotional rot beneath the gleaming, perfect surface of the Sterling marriage. Eleanor lived a life rigorously separate from her husband's, an arrangement of sophisticated, mutual wealthy disdain. Victor Sterling was perpetually absent, consumed entirely by the chairman's immense global operations, treating his marriage as nothing more than a high-value, fixed asset requiring only occasional, calculated maintenance to prevent depreciation. This immense, cavernous emotional void in Eleanor's life was being predictably filled by a clandestine affair. Darren was, by necessity, privy to every secretive meeting, every hushed, furtive phone call conducted in the back of the armored car, and every discreet rendezvous at a secluded art gallery, a private rooftop garden, or a highly exclusive, untraceable hotel suite. The lover was a younger man superficially handsome, charming, intellectually shallow, and clearly drawn far more by the ego-stroking thrill of the danger and the proximity to immense, unchecked wealth than by genuine, reciprocal affection for Eleanor. Darren did not permit himself to judge the betrayal. His mind was incapable of engaging with such messy moral concepts. He simply logged it immediately. The affair was another crucial piece of operational data, a dangerous vulnerability in Victor Sterling's perimeter, and a direct, chilling insight into the profound psychological damage wrought by supreme, unchecked wealth. He was an insider in the most literal, physical sense, present for every private moment. Yet he remained a complete and utter observer, his emotional detachment total and absolute. His only purpose, defined by his contract with Sterling, was to ensure her physical safety regardless of where she went or who she chose to meet. Darren's professional conduct in this high-pressure, emotionally fraught environment was one of profound, almost frightening professionalism. He spoke only when spoken to, his tone rigorously measured and courteous, his focus unwavering and almost hypnotic. He never once glanced at her during her secretive phone calls, never betrayed the slightest recognition of the illicit nature of her movements, and executed his duties checking security routes, securing potential locations, managing the vehicle's defensive systems with surgical, repeatable precision. He was the perfect, invisible guardian, his lack of conventional physical attractiveness ironically becoming his greatest professional asset. She never saw him as a man with desires or opinions, only as an utterly safe, reliable mechanism of protection. This absolute reliability and non-judgmental competence slowly, painstakingly began to chip away at Eleanor's initial glacial indifference. She started subtly testing him, offering increasingly veiled, provocative comments about her husband's absences, dropping small, painful hints of her own profound unhappiness, watching closely to see if he would react with judgment or offer inappropriate sympathy or, worst of all, attempt to gossip or pry. He responded with none of these. He only offered silence, diligence, and the absolute certainty of his protection. His moral standards, though brutally bent toward cynicism and strategy by his recent past, were now focused entirely on the purity of his contractual duty. He was paid an extraordinary sum to protect Eleanor Sterling, and he would do so with his life, not out of any personal regard or affection for her, but out of absolute, cold-blooded loyalty to the transactional contract that had secured his future and Sarah's. He found himself deeply, internally despising the inherent moral rot and casual extravagance of their world. The casual, obscene waste of resources, the immense emotional devastation hidden meticulously behind designer clothes and manicured facades, and the complete lack of any genuine meaning in their gilded, isolated lives. He saw Clara's betrayal and the town's prejudice magnified 1,000 times in the actions of the ultra-rich. He saw how Sterling used his wealth to manipulate entire nations, and how Eleanor used her immense wealth to facilitate her emotional escape. Yet, this intense internal disdain was meticulously contained and repurposed, fueling his cold resolve rather than coloring his professional actions. He treated Eleanor Sterling with the same meticulous attention and operational care he would give to a high-value, sensitive shipment of illegal arms or corporate secrets, an expensive, high-risk asset that must, at all costs, reach its destination safely and on schedule. This quiet, unwavering, and utterly reliable competence eventually earned her deep, complex trust. It was a unique bond forged not from shared intimacy or friendship, but from the recognized, desperate need for reliability in a world built on lies and fleeting loyalties. She began to rely heavily on his professional judgment, asking him to vet potential staff, to analyze the often flawed security arrangements of various private venues before her arrival, and eventually she would simply ask him to sit in silence in the corner of her drawing room while she composed herself before difficult public appearances. To her, Darren became a peculiar kind of functional confessor, one who never actually heard the confession, but whose unwavering, detached presence offered a silent, safe, and entirely non-judgmental anchor in her volatile, emotionally fractured world. She knew, with an instinctive certainty that transcended logic and social boundaries, that he would never betray her secrets, not out of affection for her, but out of the sheer, uncompromising professional purity of his transaction with her husband. The final irony of his position was now fully complete. The man destroyed by his own honesty and moral sensibility was now flourishing as a high-paid spy and guardian, his absolute integrity and deep intellect repurposed to protect the shallow secrets of the very decadence he secretly scorned. His mind was constantly analyzing, categorizing, and weighting, for he knew that proximity to absolute power meant guaranteed proximity to catastrophic vulnerability, and that his true, ultimate purpose was still to conquer the system, not merely to observe its decay.